The title on our panel is basically Game-Changing Partnerships, the Power of Specialized Consultants. I'm joined here today, and I will kindly ask them again, going over my fangirl session with Vlad, Kate, and Nav. So if possible, if I may ask you to do a roundtable regarding introductions. Nav, starting with you.
Yeah, hi, I'm Nav. I've been in the industry about 26 years. I specialize in legal, business, and investment-related issues. I've worked in-house in games companies. I've worked in law firms, but I've also helped to run a game studio. So experience across a wide areas of the industry, and my consultancy I've been doing for about 10 years now.
And hi, I'm Kate Edwards. I'm a geographer who's been doing culturalization work in the industry for 32 years. If you were at my talk this morning, you know more about me than you probably wanted to. But I also spent 5 years running the IGDA, as well as 3 years running Global Game Jam. And I've been self-employed as a consultant for 20 years.
Can we have the countdown thing set to like, I guess, 38 minutes now? Thank you. Hi, my name's Vlad. I'm kind of a jack of all trades, master of fun person. I've done everything in games except for actual like hardcore programming or art, besides doodling as a creative director for the artists to figure it out. I'm mainly here as a non-native representative for the Polish game development efforts. I represent their Indie Games Polska Game Developers Association, the GIC conference that we have in October every year. Feel free to come by, talk to me about that. And obviously the government initiatives that have us do, parties at different international events and have booths and stuff there as well. So, and, self-employed for like 23 years now. Yeah.
Thanks. And I realized I haven't introduced myself. I'm Mada. I'm a lead producer over at Improbable side. We're doing agency work, so outsourcing included, previously working with some of the Romanian publishers as well. But essentially now, ever since we've moved a bit, or at least ever since I've moved a bit more into the consultancy world, as I said, I feel like I'm quite junior in this field. So I'm really lucky to be surrounded by you all who have and bring to the table such an enormous amount of experience. And because of that, because we're living in the day and age where our roles, responsibilities are shifting with the industry, curious to see who wants to be a consultant or who is one from the audience. Do we have any consultants here? Cool, have your show of hands. Okay, anybody who wants to go into consulting or do a bit of consulting or has even thought about it? Cool, thanks for that. Nice. Howdy everyone. In this case, let's kick it off and saying, we've been speaking about it a bit earlier, but you all mentioned how important it is to basically earn the trust of the companies you're either working with or with your partners. Can you, and do you want to start discussing a bit what's your role from consultant to partner? Kate, do you want to go first?
Sure. So the way I see myself is like when I'm working with a game studio, I see myself as a world building partner because of the kind of skills that I bring to it, where I'm looking for, cultural fit and cultural representation in their game world, and, whether or not that game world is going to be compatible with different markets around the world. So, they see me often as like, you're the person who finds offensive stuff in our game, which I will do that. And oftentimes that's their main concern, because obviously they don't want to be called out on social media. They don't want to be banned by a government. So the majority of my work is focused on what I would call reactive culturalization. So I'm looking for things that are going to be a problem. But I see it as much broader than that. It's like that's just one aspect of what I'm looking for. I'm looking for other ways that I can help them imagine what their game world can be like, in especially how it's going to be understood by cultures around the world, because they want obviously the story and the world to be as appealing to as many people as possible. And so that's the way I see it. And it is building that trust is not easy. I mean, it's especially when I first left Microsoft, inside the company after 13 years, I was like the person. I mean, everyone would come to me and my team. But then I left, and now I'm out in the big wide world, and nobody knows who I am. Nobody knows what I can do. And I can sit there and say, well, yeah, but I worked on this at Microsoft and worked on that. And it does help with some credibility, but that still doesn't prove to them that you can do what you say you can do.
That's a very interesting take, but in that case, how do you build that trust?
Well, you just have to basically beg and plead for them to give you a shot and let you try to help them. And that's what happened. In some cases, it was former colleagues from Microsoft who brought me onto a project because they had moved on to a different company. So they already knew what I was able to do. So early on for me, it was word of mouth that really powered, my ability to get work. But then once I was with them, the word of mouth kind of spread, and then I would have people approaching me saying, yeah, so-and-so who you worked with at this company, who you used to work with at Microsoft, said that you can help us with this problem, and so usually they'd give me a shot. And what I often did was do like a trial run with them. I said, hey, just give me a little bit of content. I'll show you what kind of feedback I can give you. And then, from there you can make a judgment if I can really be helpful.
Thanks so much, Kate. Your experience is very much hands-on for actually showing what you can do. But Nav, considering you're talking more about biz dev and legal elements, how does that translate to you in that case?
Yeah, I mean, this has been, it's an interesting one because obviously, games and law, I mean, they're not compatible straight away, but actually the legal side is really important for games because of the IP issues and the way that the companies are changing all the time and merging or acquired, et cetera, et cetera. So law does get involved a lot, but I mean, I have a passion for games, and that's why I found myself in video games. But I think for me, the way that it's happened is because of the different experiences I've had, not just as a lawyer, but also in the business side, it's enabled me to have a better relationship with the developers and publishers that I work with, and also the middleware companies. So I think the main thing is that, first of all, it's building up a relationship. A lot of it, like what Kate has said, has come from word of mouth or me, doing talks and things like this. But once they know what you can do, I think the realization was, because I've done these other things, a lot of people don't know. They just think I'm just the lawyer, but actually I've done these other things. And so what happens is I end up doing more, become not just a supplier of some services, but I become an advisor, a trusted advisor, and sometimes helping with strategy, and then right on to the point where we're raising money and we're getting investment. And so it isn't just about, someone's going to earn some money by doing some services. Actually, it's someone who cares about their studio or their publishing arrangements or their tech and actually wants to get involved. So that's kind of what my path has been. You start off doing some services initially, but then you build a long-term relationship.
That's absolutely interesting, because we're talking now about going from consultancy to partnership, and it's essentially a partnership between us and our collaborators. But Vlad, you're a jack of all trades. Your experience is a bit different from Kate's and Nav's. How does that translate to you with building trust?
Well, I just want to take a moment and kind of just praise Nav and Kate as being industry peers of mine that I've known for a while, because Nav with his approach has really kind of mastered the consigliere godfather style of like, I maybe come in and fix one thing, but then I stick around. It's like if you look at my LinkedIn profile, I say I'm the Mary Poppins of the game industry, because I've kind of pigeonholed myself in the way that I come in, I do a little dance, I sing a little song, but in the end, I hope that I'm not really needed. Maybe that's why, I shot myself in the foot doing that, because it's nice to be wanted. It's nice to be dependent, like for people to depend on you. But, Kate, in the same way, whether there's peace in the world, it needs to be kept by her. If there's conflict, then she needs to solve it. So it's like her work is perpetual. In my case, I've just really, I think what we all have in common, the three of us, is that we were in the industry at a time when certain responsibilities, certain opportunities were just lying on the ground, and we were privileged enough to be able to kind of almost formulate our own jobs, our own positions, our own kind of Dungeons and Dragons characters in this industry. My main issue, I would say my personal weakness, just to find a moment of, vulnerability as strength, is I spread myself too thin, right? I made that mistake. Now, right now, and this is the question I have for the audience, because why are there so many people at this panel if just 4 of you are consultants and 1 is considering to go? It's like, why are you here? Is it because you're afraid that if you get fired, you will have to become a consultant? Because you're not the first, and you're definitely not going to be the last. There's a lot of people that are suddenly consultants without consent, And that's one point I just wanted to leave with here, because I just rolled into this. Right? I'm not a big fan of Dr. Disrespect as an influencer, but I like his quote of like violence, speed, momentum. Violence got me there, then I picked up speed, and then I maintained momentum. And that's why I've been doing this for 23 years. I think we all have similar perspectives on that, but that's where I'll leave it. It's like, I didn't choose this, it just kind of came to me.
In that case, do you think it actually matters how specialized versus generalized you become as a consultant?
Yes. I mean, nobody wants to be Mark Hamill and not get gigs because he's Luke Skywalker, right? And then he became a voice actor, and now we all love him as the Joker in the animated series of Batman. But I feel like I might have made that mistake. And so I've been telling a lot of people, if you decide to become a consultant, be mindful of that.
Thanks, Vlad. Kate, you and Vlad have been working together for a whole bunch of time in that case. And I know his views on this matter. How about yourself? Do you share those views?
Well, for me, it's just like the work that I do is very specialized. And so if you look across the landscape of people who help with international adaptation of content, so we're talking about localization people, which the great majority of whom are language translators, which is extremely important. I mean, we're always going to need text translation. And I focus on more of the non-text content, so all the visuals and the ideas that are behind the game, the allegory and the narrative and all that kind of stuff. And typically translators are not they're not paid to look for the kind of things that I do, even though a lot of them are qualified to do so. But they're like, yeah, but if I'm not getting paid for it, why am I going to offer it? Because they're not going to compensate me for that extra work, which I totally understand. So the thing that has really benefited my path as a consultant is my specialty, because it is highly specialized. So if you look across all the localization people in the industry, and including myself as a culturalization person, most people are primary care physicians, so you go there to get there for colds and achy joints and things. I work on aortas in your heart. It's like I'm very specialized. So it's like you don't come to me for if you have the sniffles. You come to me if someone's heart's about to explode. And so it is a specialized skill. But then a lot of companies are realizing that, well, what's worse, getting a cold or having your heart implode on you? I don't want the latter. That's really scary. So that's why they come to me, because they don't know what they don't know about their own world that they're building. So there's a certain level of uncertainty and nervousness about what they're going to put out there to the world. And they want that kind of assurance that I would give them by saying, okay, look, I'll do a pass. I'll look for things that might be a problem. I'll also look for opportunities to improve it. Because it's almost like buying insurance in a way. It's like we feel better because we had this person with this highly specific specialty come in, look at it, give us the okay, and now we feel better about releasing. And so I think that specialization has really been the strength for me.
I love the different perspectives in this group, because if you've noticed, while Vlad is a bit more of a jack of all trades, Kate is super specialized, Nav has a couple of specializations, but they're still restricted. So having these different perspectives is really worthwhile. Go on.
Well, we'll use video game analogies. So if I was a character in an RPG, I'll be the fighter, mage, and the rogue. So
At the same time.
At the same time. But the specialism side is right. But what you'll find with law is a lot of people specialize in different areas of law. Yeah. So what I did was turn that on its head and just specialized in video games, and then how the law reacts or interacts with video games. So my specialism has come that way. So I can do GDPR, I can do corporates, I can do IP. But the other thing that I learned was that you can't be master of everything, and you cannot be a specialist within those specific areas. So So the other thing I learned to do was have a network. So as a consultant, I think the main thing is, as you become this trusted advisor, is to not only solve those problems yourself, but also have people that you can reach out to. For example, Kate, when there's a problem which isn't legal but becomes a bit more cultural, I'll be sending it to Kate, that kind of thing. So you have a network, and I've worked on projects where, people have said to me, Nav, we need a project where we've got the developers based in one country, this is happening in another, et cetera, et cetera. Do you have the relationships? And I've got the network for the lawyers, and I've got the network for the investors. And it just makes it easier for everyone with those relationships.
That generally leads into our next point, which is typically the power of networks. Because essentially here in Romania, when I was growing up, it was usually said, oh, it's not good to bring your friends into the company because you're just bringing them because it's your friends. But in your line of work, or mine as well, network is a very important one because it also leads on trust and the trust that you can have on people. So on that aspect, Kate, what are your thoughts on general working and reaching into your networks, and how do you build that?
Yeah, I mean, networking, obviously, for anyone in this industry is absolutely critical. I mean, you have to network, and not just for consulting purposes. You have to network for finding jobs, keeping your job, doing personal growth, growing your skill set, all of those things. In my case, exactly like Nav said, I mean, I also have in my network a lot of people who have a lot of very specific specialties and areas of subject matter expertise that I often have to leverage in my work, because I never know what is going to be thrown at me. I mean, companies come to me and say, we're developing a character from this culture that does this, and we need to find out if this is okay. Now, I can give my own kind of pass on it and provide my kind of high-level look at it, but if I'm not from that culture, which, I'm from one specific culture, if I'm not from there, if I don't speak that language, if I'm not from that ethnic group, obviously I need somebody to come and advise. So, I bring in a sensitivity reader, I bring in another consultant who represents that particular cultural group, indigenous groups in particular, because so many developers today are leveraging themes and designs from a lot of indigenous groups around the world. I have networks through a lot of groups around the globe where I can reach out to them and say, hey, can you please take a look at this for me? Just like I mentioned earlier today about, on the Indiana Jones game, having archaeologists in my network and geologists who I brought in to help out with that game because that was the request of the client. They said, we're just writing the narrative because it's Indiana Jones and it's archaeology, but then we need to step back and think, are we actually doing this correctly? And so that's where they needed the additional help. So, and I could not have done any of that without networking and constantly maintaining and growing my network.
Thanks, Kate. Vlad, I see you nodding.
Yeah, the whole word of mouth thing, the whole referral thing is so important. I just got a little bit of PTSD where I zoned out because the worst thing that can happen is obviously if you actually vouch for somebody, you bring somebody in and they don't deliver or they traumatize the team in some way or another. Now I have good examples of that as well, but the one thing that I've learned from Kate is that concept of like thought leadership, of like you are the person in your field, and when that people instantly think of, right? It's like we think of Westerns, we think of Clint Eastwood, we think of like, oh no, politically sensitive stuff, we think of Kate. And I've managed to be in the industry at a point in time when I started out, when there weren't a lot of biz dev people that were in a different country every week. And I've been able to kind of leverage that wider net over the world, which thanks to me working with Kate has also kind of made me look at it through the lens of like the differences, right? It's like talent is equally distributed, but it's not equally represented in the world. One example I think that always comes to me in the last 2 years of like how powerful that network thing is I was talking to a developer that shall not be named that had an amazing, ambitious follow-up to their already successful title. And it featured a black protagonist. Cool. Unfortunately, there's kind of a tradition here, and you might have seen the Prince of Persia game by Ubisoft, where you have the Killmonger character. So it's a black guy with dreads, and there's about 10 games that have exactly that same stereotype character replicated. It's just Killmonger, right? And cool, okay, what are the enemies? Oh yeah, they're like tribal-looking demonic equivalents of tribal people in South Africa, like in the African continent. Okay, cool. Third slide on the pitch deck, you see the team, all white people. A little bit of a dissonance there. So fortunately, you know, I knew Kate knew Carl, who's a consultant on these kind of terms. And just featuring Carl, who's black, on that slide would have made a difference. Now, in the end, they had the conversation. We connected Carl to the team. They didn't continue on with that particular concept, maybe for the best. But it's at those kind of moments where I've personally witnessed how knowing the right person, who knows the right person, can diffuse an otherwise awkward situation. Yeah.
I love because we're going into hands-on examples. Do you guys have any others?
Well, I mean, I think, again, going back to the trust thing, and also and sometimes doing things as a favor just because you're a good person, right? Not just for money. But, you know, for my network, for example, I had an email just today, someone saying, we're looking to invest in a company in Italy. And do you know any specific consultants or legal advisors for that region? And so I just asked them, well, what is the type of company? Because obviously everything's under NDA. But they gave me enough so I can focus on it and give them the right person. Because the thing is, it's not always yes, because they can go and look up, you know, law firms and things in books or agencies or whatever. But because they know I've probably vetted these people already, it just gives them that credibility. And if they need an intro, I can actually make that introduction myself. So I think having the approach of, you know, having a wide enough network that you can actually add value to someone, even when you're not actually consulting with them at that point.
I mean, one example I would give too that is maybe a negative example, but I think it's something to point out is that back in my Microsoft days, they had, for a time, this role at every Microsoft subsidiary around the world called a subsidiary program manager. And part of their role was to basically kind of be the voice for that market. You know, so if something was coming in from headquarters, a piece of content or a product or whatever, they were supposed to provide feedback saying, yeah, I don't think that's going to work here. Or we might need changes, you know, things like that, which I thought that's a good role. And so we had an expansion on Age of Empires coming out that included the Macedonians. And so, you know, which I already flagged, I had said this is going to be a problem in Greece. And this is back before it became North Macedonia and all that stuff. And I said, this is going to be a big problem because Greece, you know, is very adamant that Macedonians are Greek history. It's not separate. And so I told the team, I said, this is going to be a problem for Greece. Well, they said, well, let's see what the subsidiary PM says. Well, the subsidiary PM for Greece, he said, I don't see a problem with this. And now he's born and raised in Greece and he's from that culture. And, you know, he just said, I don't see a problem with this. So they took his advice. They released the expansion pack and it was banned on day one by the Greek government because they said, what are you doing? You have Greeks and you have Macedonians. That makes no sense. And so that launched me having to go through a 4-month cycle of trying to get the Foreign Ministry of Greece to understand our viewpoint, which they eventually did after I nudged them in the right direction over many, many months. Until finally they realized, they said, you know, I think the best way to do this is just have Macedonians and Greeks. Like, thank you, that's great. But the point being is that this person who gave that advice, even though he's from the culture, he represents that market, he kind of looks at the world through sort of this globalized tech lens, you know, which is kind of disassociated a bit with his own culture. And so that is another thing you have to be a little careful about. If you're bringing in people, you really have to think about their credibility as an expert and whether or not they're really going to help you or not, because that can be a big problem.
Yep.
I genuinely love the idea of how subjective we are as humans. And sometimes typically we need to refer to other people's opinions as well, not only our own. And that brings us into an element that Vlad, you raised about Kate as well, and being a thought leader basically in your line of work. That automatically comes with trust, right?
Yeah.
But,
I mean, to a degree, I'd like to say that what I'm an expert in is failing because I've watched a lot of things go wrong. And so, you've got the concept of canary in the gold mine, right? But it has to be the right canary, right? That's a perfect cautionary tale that Kate just told. So I like to look at the World War Z thing where, the Israelis were the only ones who built walls, even though they were not tall enough for the zombies, right? But they had the concept of the 10th man, right? It's like there's always one person that really, really scrutinizes everything and says no at the very end. And that kind of brings us back to the insurance policy thing. It's like, if we mess up, who do you think is going to end up on the chopping board, right? It's like, that's not something we talk about often as consultants. But if we bring in the wrong person or if we say the wrong thing, it's like, we have to scrutinize everything. And I think that that's also very important in any line of consultancy, where it's like, with that kind of power comes great responsibility. Voltaire, not Uncle Ben, right? Yeah.
Thanks. Now, what are your thoughts on generally being a thought leader over in your line of work?
Well, I mean, look, the area that I'm in, we've seen, I've seen a lot of things go right, a lot of things go wrong, and projects. And the thing is, what you do is you build up a portfolio of, you have all this sort of in your locker, all these things that you can turn to when things go wrong. And I think by seeing things go wrong, you obviously make sure that those mistakes aren't made again, and finding ways to solve these. And yeah, you can't do it on your own. You've got to bring in the right people. But I think overall, the more experience that you get as a consultant, it becomes easier. It's not like it's it took time for us to get to this kind of level of just like in a game. You're playing the game, you're getting past the bosses, and you're getting through to where you are. But and then it gets harder to level. So you do more things. Like now I've kind of expanded my thing to also sit on some boards as well. So just to get some extra knowledge about how the world works. And I recently got sitting on a board of a NASDAQ company. So it's completely different from the US in terms of regulation. But just the fact that I wanted to level further, so that's been really, really good in helping that company grow and become much more successful than it was, because it was not in the best state. So these are the types of things I think you learn from these things, and you're trying to bring that value back to your clients.
And if I may add to that, that's kind of the concept of momentum, right? It's like, what is Hollywood like? It's like, oh, you're only as good as the last thing you did, right? And there is a certain element of that. Kate just worked on The Great Circle, right? The latest Indiana Jones game, and I know for a fact that that's going to bring her a lot of new clients, a lot of new work, right? In my case, not that much happening lately. I kind of lost my momentum over the years for various reasons. However, that doesn't eliminate the ability of helping people, right? So we all do pro bono. Don't come storming us for free time. I'm just saying we all do pro bono. We tend to donate a part of our time doing that. However, it's nice, it's cool when you get to a point where you're privileged enough to be able to say no to things, or sorry, I don't have time for this. But in the meantime, having done what we have done, there's nothing better than also being able to be involved in a deeper way, like Nav said, and also be at something from the beginning, right? We've all been called in to things that are like dumpster fires, but it's also nice when we can call in and be like, and that's obviously the consultant's dream, when you're there from day zero, and you kind of also are involved. It's like, what's your input? And that brings me to the most important part of what I wanted to leave this panel with, because I'm seeing the time as well, I'm mindful of that, is just, there's a friend of ours, also very renowned speaker. If you ever go to a conference, he's speaking, skip everything, cancel your meetings, go to Toit Weideman. His company, he's a monetization consultant in the video game industry. His company's called I Toit You So. Okay? Why? I hate to say I told you so. And Kate has war stories up the wazoo. She's writing a book, spoiler, about it. But the worst position you can be in as a consultant is to know that something is going wrong, that you're warning the team, and you have to say, I told you so at some point. So like the skill of inception, making the people believe, like Kate's an expert in that, Nav's, I'm not so much, I'm too emotional for that stuff, I'm not that Game of Thrones in my back of my head, but like being able to make people believe that it's their idea, you might not take full credit for it, but oh my God, that's the number one, I think, skill for consultants nowadays, especially if you become an involuntary one, God forbid.
Kate, do you want to jump in? That?
Well, I think that kind of goes along the lines of, there's the saying that a consultant's real job is to consult yourself out of a job. And that's often repeated, when you're working with a client, especially for long term, that eventually you're hoping that your influence on their work is going to be so beneficial that they need you less and less and less. And that was exactly what happened with me and BioWare, because I've worked on all the BioWare projects since Jade Empire. And so back in those days, that was like, I don't know, 20 years ago or whatever, they were very new at this, they were, navigating the space of how to deal with different cultural issues and everything. And so I was brought in on day one. I would read the draft of the script. I'd look at the concept art, provide guidance early on, which is what I prefer on all the projects, because I can offer, really easy course corrections super early, where it's not expensive to fix it, not expensive to change their mind. I obviously don't want to interfere with the creative vision, but I do want to make sure they're not heading in a direction right from the start that's going to be a big problem for a specific culture or region. But then over the years, as I worked on all the Mass Effects and Dragon Ages and all of that, BioWare, especially the people who were there most of the time I was working on those projects, it was the same team. And so they learned and I learned from them. And so basically every project, my engagement became less and less and less. And I was really happy about that, because they were really taking seriously what I was telling them and what I was trying to basically teach them. And it's like, on one level, it's like, well, I'm not making less money. So, there's that. But at the same time, you're like, I'm really proud, because I'm like, look, they're actually doing it on their own. It's like, it's a very parental kind of, feeling where you're saying, I taught them to walk and they're walking and now they're starting to run. And I can't believe this. This is really cool.
Yeah, and but there is one perspective on that as well. So sometimes I have been through the whole journey with a company. So from its formation, particularly game developers, right to the journey they've released some product, got them licensed IP when they needed that, and also eventually sold the company, and been through all of that with them. Then sometimes I'm dealing with their parent company, and then there's a point at which those guys will earn out and they'll set up a new company, and I'm back, and then they're back again. Nav, can you help us again? So it's a cycle, but this is where the relationship part is really important. So if you've got skills, obviously keep on building on those skills, but keep those relationships, because the industry isn't that big and people remember you. And if you've done a good job, it doesn't matter where they are. We're always going through lots of cycles. I mean, I joined in the mid-90s, so I've seen the cycles already. Prior to that, there were other cycles as well. All the people that, were in the industry, from the 80s onwards. And I'm still working with people who've been working since the 80s. So, there are people, and they remember you. So I think that relationship element of it, and just like Kate said, you do get, work yourself out of a job sometimes, but that's fine. It just means that you were successful. And I've also placed people, got people in to do some of the stuff, for example, on the legal side, they can get an in-house counsel, but then I'm still working with the in-house counsel years later on things when they need me. So it isn't just a case of fire and forget. For me, it's always about the long term.
Yeah.
Thanks for that. We're almost at time, but I'd really love to do a lightning round, going a bit off script here. But do you want to give it like a shot to be, what's the biggest win? What's a struggle as well that you faced, or that you feel that would be good for everybody, even thinking of going into consultancy?
Well, I think one that I would suggest is that, especially when you're just starting out, you got to be flexible with how you approach clients, because let's face it, you're self-employed, you're desperate, you have bills to pay. That's exactly where I was after I left Microsoft. I left Microsoft and I had 4.5 months of runway before I ran out of money, because I'd already used my stock options on sending my daughter to college and all that stuff. So I'm like, okay, it's very much like that, the story of Cortez going to the New World and burning the ships, because he said there's only way forward is forward. We can't go back to Spain. So I kind of did the same thing. I left Microsoft knowing that there was a high level of risk. But I actually thrive on that. So I kind of felt like I'm going to be energized, I'm going to be focused. And it worked. I mean, I got my client, I had 4.5 months, I got them at 4 months. So I had 2 weeks left, and I'm just like, phew, you know, and that was thanks to my parents making connections for me. So, but like BioWare, I mentioned BioWare as a client. The whole way I got BioWare, because when I worked on their very first game with them at Jade Empire, I was still inside Microsoft. And then after I left Microsoft, now I was interacting not directly with BioWare, I was interacting with the Microsoft people who were talking to BioWare. Then I left Microsoft, and the BioWare people moved on to the next game, and they said, hey, who was that person we were dealing with who's doing all the cultural stuff? So one of my Microsoft colleagues connected me directly with them, and they said, oh, that's great. So we've got this new project coming up. We'd love for you to work on it, but we didn't budget for you at all. So so they said, what's your rate? And I said, well, here's my rate. They're like, we have no budget for that. I'm like, okay, well, I'm not working for free, I'll tell you that much. And they said, well, what can you do? So I ended up actually giving them a 50% discount on my rate, which felt really bad, but that got me BioWare as a client. And so once I took that sacrifice, because I'm like, getting BioWare as a client, that's a really big deal as a consultant. That's a big name, especially back then. So I said, I've got to do this. I have no choice. I'm going to do the 50% discount, which I did. And then I worked with them. And then as we finished up that project, they came to me and said, we're already starting the next project. We've already budgeted for you. And I said, well, wait, but you budgeted at what, 50%? They're like, yeah. And I said, yeah, that was an introductory rate. And they said, oh, we're sorry. So then I worked on the next project at 50%, and I said, this is the last time. If there's another project, you're gonna raise my rate, which eventually they did, but I had to fight for it because, you know, they're gonna pay as little as possible. But was it worth it? Absolutely, because now, you know, I've had all that experience working with BioWare for all these years.
Thanks, Kate. Nav?
Yeah, I mean, no, I completely agree. I mean, you've got to make sacrifices at the beginning. I do have clients now who are still on this amazing rate still to this day.
Buddy rate.
Yeah, and it's not going to change because, you know, they're great, you know, so, but, you know, you've got to make these sacrifices. But the other thing I'd say is you've got to be genuine, because what happens is you get a lot of people coming to this industry. I mean, I've been passionate about it since the 70s. I mean, I love games. I was in board games as well, and creating games as well and things like this, but it was always a hobby. But the passion never went, you know, and I'm still playing games a lot, doing lots of research into games myself, you know, really enjoy like the way they're made and stuff. And I've been fortunate enough to see the journey of games in-house, working, you know, with the games, helping to run a game studio and things. So my passion is there. And I think you can always see that when someone is coming to you or you're trying to get business, if they see the passion in me, you know, they always think, oh, well, you do know what you're on about. And I don't know everything, but I know enough to sort of at least convince them that I will care, you know, and I know what's happening in the market. And because I've been involved in all the different areas, free-to-play, console, PC, esports, you name it, I've managed to pick up the key things that I needed from those areas, but also continue with them. So I think being genuine, making sacrifices, and just be, you know, just keep going. I mean, you cannot give up. I mean, you've got to give it a go. And also leaving Microsoft, as we share that in common.
That's the best part. Vlad, close your mic.
I thought this was a lightning round, so I'm going to try to do it in 20 seconds. Who here is born after 2005? Okay, cool. Who's born here after 2000? All right, cool. So there's a couple of people. Do not think that the amount of followers that you will have on social media and the ghetto that is LinkedIn right now is making you an expert. Do the work first, then try to become a thought leader. If I look, like LinkedIn is a mess right now. Everyone wants to be an influencer. Yeah. Don't. Just do the work. Be genuine, like Nav said. Sorry for the old man yells at cloud moment right now, but it's just like, come on. How many of those videos do we need, right? It's like, do the work, and, you know, people will find you. Word of mouth still matters the most.
Yep. Thanks so much, guys. Like, I need to do a bow to you guys, because like the end of it was really, really good. So thank you so much for joining us. And we're leading into a couple of, almost a minute of questions. Kata, are we okay? There's still the question.
We're good. Thank you very much.
Perfect.
Let's give them
Thanks
a round of applause.
Thank you.
We're great, guys. Great.
And let's take a couple of questions.
Yeah, make them count.
What's one of your favorite projects / partners to work with in your specialization, of course, either because they just listened to you or because you just were really passionate about it? Just each of you, like really quick.
Mine's super easy. I mean, even though I've worked on almost 300 games, and there was a lot of really fantastic projects I've worked on. I loved working on the Halo games and Age of Empires and all that. But just personally, two of the most fun I've ever done was Star Wars: The Old Republic, because I'm a huge Star Wars geek, and working with BioWare on that was just so much fun. But then Indiana Jones of the Great Circle, because not only was the team just so welcoming of my skill and expertise, what was that, last week at Nordic Game? Yeah, last week at Nordic Game, when they won Game of the Year, the team actually invited me on stage with them. They said, if we win Game of the Year, you're joining us on stage, which I've never had that happen to me as a consultant, that they felt that I am part of the family, that I actually was that consequential to helping them make the game. And that just felt so cool, to be included like that, because normally our job as a consultant, we're kind of invisible, especially like in my work. If I do my job really well, nobody will ever know, unless my name is in the credits. They just won't know I was there. So that was a really kind of cool moment for me.
Yeah, I mean, I've got quite a few. I mean, I mean, especially on the licensing side, like Formula One, WRC, all these types of things. But one of the most interesting or weirdest ones that came up was from Epic. Actually, they were working on this game, and they showed me this mode, and I went, that just looks like a battle royale. What do you want me to do? Can we work on the age rating? So I was working on the age rating with them on that one. So it was interesting, and then you don't know at that time how big something can become, and that was huge. So there's an example.
Yeah, so you have Nav to thank for all the kids playing Fortnite.
Yeah, it's all my fault.
Well, adults now, right? Because it's been 10 years. Any studio that just lets me work at their office, really? It's just so nice to have like a home away from home, right? I mean, we've all been there, and like Kate said, it's nice to sit in the audience and see them succeed. But I was there when Kate got invited to be on stage, and yeah, it's cool. It's like to feel like you're part of it, not just some mercenary that gets called in when they need you, right?
I had one here.
Yes.
We'll get to you, don't worry.
I can get to you.
Exactly.
Thanks a lot for you being here. You mentioned networking is something really, really important. And the thing is, though, it can be really, really scary. Even something as simple as going to someone and offering your hand can create panic. And in my case, it doesn't matter how long I'm already doing it, it already comes up to a certain degree. Does that get easier for you guys over time? Do you still have struggle with it?
Can I take that one? Kate and I go to San Diego Comic-Con, right? She does the game program there. And it's not even the fact that they're celebrities, because we all have like a shared passion for fandom, otherwise we wouldn't be there. It's the handlers, it's the gatekeepers. How do you get past those, right? So that's kind of like the final boss behind the final boss type of ordeal, right? When it comes to that kind of stuff, practice makes perfect. The more you do it, it really comes down to just doing it thousands and thousands of times until it's fine to talk to a prime minister or a president, because it's just, you just see a person and nothing that is around that.
Well, one thing I would just advise is that, especially if you're using LinkedIn to reach out to people, just a way to kind of warm up to networking. When you reach out to people, don't offer your hand, ask a question about something they've done. And I give that advice to a lot of younger people who are getting in the industry or people who want to network more. It's like someone who's doing the job that you'd like to do, or they're working on a project that you'd love to work on. Ask them a question about something that you saw in the game that they did, that they were associated associated with and ask a specific question like, how did you guys figure out this thing? I really like what you did, and I'm really curious about your approach. Because oftentimes, assuming they have the time to respond, they will respond to a question that's very specific like that, because it's just you trying to inquire, and then you can kind of, edge in there, well, yeah, this is something that I'm aspiring to do, or it's something that I'm doing now, but I want to get better at it. And, and you're trying to kind of develop a dialogue, and the dialogue could evolve into a mentorship. And then eventually what it really is about is exposing your abilities to the person, but you don't spring it upon them right away. You don't ask for a job. You don't even offer your portfolio right away. But you eventually kind of get to it and say, hey, if you could develop the rapport, then see if they're open to it.
Yeah, just show genuine interest.
Yeah, and what I'd add is, it doesn't come naturally to everybody. Networking, it can take time, and you've got to understand how, to approach people. But sometimes it's good to find people who are good at that and work, and hang out with them, and they will introduce you to many people. So don't think that you've got to do it on your own. Find friends that can help you do it. I'm here if you need it.
Just on that note, back at Reboot 2 months ago, I was the same as you after Kate's keynote. I went over, I shook her hand, and now I'm moderating her panel. So I'm super proud of that. As I said, fangirl.
And last question here.
Thank you so much. It's been very exciting. My question for Kate is linked to the Indiana Jones example that you were giving, where there were your father a geologist and then an archaeologist and then you as a geographer. And I was wondering, when several specialists come together to work on a game, how is that knowledge kind of captured? Do you collaborate when thinking or working on the game? And then for Nav as well, I'm doing a PhD now in cultural studies. I'm an anthropologist by training. And my thesis, I wrote a chapter on narrative architecture, and one of the professors from my committee asked me about the justice system. It's very exciting. And I was wondering if, when designing a justice system, if you have ever been consulted for that, or whether you think that people who are savvy about the law or studied law would be a good resource to consult when designing justice systems.
Well, no, it's interesting. We haven't had it for a game. It would be interesting. I'd love to get involved in that project if there was, but it does happen in the real world. So, for example, in the Middle Eastern clients sometimes want, a jurisdiction outside their particular region because of all the restrictions they have, and they sometimes design a system from ground up. And I sometimes consult with, very large law firms, particularly if they're looking at entertainment and how to do entertainment law, which also involves video games and stuff. That does go on actually in the real world, but not actually in the virtual world. So that would be great if someone wanted to do a project like that. I'm here.
And just to respond to the Indiana Jones comments, basically the way that it worked is that I was acting as the main source of the subject matter expertise. And so I was orchestrating their involvement, and it was basically compartmentalized so that, the Egyptologists, for example, working only on the Giza Plateau level. So they would review the script, they'd review the representation of the local workers, and all of those factors. When the narrative team needed a fictional piece of for the narrative's sake, something fictional that's going to go on a wall in hieroglyphs, then I would send it over to the Egyptologists, who would translate it into accurate hieroglyphs or hieratic script or whatever was needed, and then we would just put it back to the game team. They'd throw it up on the wall, and there it is. And we went to painstaking lengths to make sure everything was very authentic, because we know what's going to happen in the game. Players are going to screenshot stuff, and they're going to figure out exactly what it says. And we were kind of joking, but I don't think it's a joke, that this game is probably far more culturally accurate than any of the movies ever were. Because we spent so much time on this. And so, even with the geologists, the whole point of the geology aspect is there's 17 stones that you have to collect, the different Allmaker stones. You haven't played the game, I'm kind of spoiling it. But anyway, the Nair team, they just randomly assign mineral types to the different stones, and the stones are found at different parts of the world. But then at one point they came back and said, you know what, we need to make sure that those stone types, the mineral types, are actually available in the locations where you find them. So that's when the geologist, my father, and then also another geologist were brought in to verify, like, are those stones actually there? And we had long discussions about this, like, would it have been possible during ancient trade routes for that type of stone to reach this point? That's the level of discussion we had, and that's where we kind of ended up like, no, it wouldn't really be possible. So actually out of the 17 stones, I think we ended up changing 9 of them because it just wasn't accurate enough. Even though most players will never know, they'll never think about it. They're just like, oh, I found the stone, yay. But to us, we take it very seriously.
Don't quote me on it, but I think the guys at 11-bit did something with the justice system for Frostpunk 1 and 2. Might want to look into that. It's a great excuse to reach out to them on LinkedIn, like Kate said.
Ask them the question.
Yeah.
That'd be great.
All right. Thank you very much. Very insightful. Thank you.